Hey y'all, Zelda here. I am here with a week ahead tarot reading. I guess a tarot and oracle reading. Um, I am going to show you three different palm stones. They're all carved by Leandro de Souza. They're of three different materials and three slightly different styles. So you're going to look and see which one speaks to you, which one feels like it resonates most. I encourage you, if you would like to develop this, you can see which one visually appeals, but you could also just feel if you notice any shift, any differences in your body when you're looking at one rather than the other. These can all be different ways that your intuition is speaking to you to help you pick the reading that feels most aligned. So, before we jump into that, I just wanted to let you know the decks that we're going to be using. We're going to be using the messages from animal spirits, um, by Stephen Farmer. And we're going to be using the Luminous Void Tarot for the tarot deck and the Uncertain Oracle for the other oracle card. So the animal one, the Uncertain Oracle, and the Luminous Void. And I will have the description that details each of the decks, since that is the most curious question usually for these. So let's jump into the three different palm stones. The first one is this star being palm carved from blue apatite. It is really hard to see the chatoyancy, the kind of asterism that is actually present in this. It is a really beautiful blue off camera with this kind of cool streak, and their name is Cielo, which means sky or heaven or like firmament in Spanish. That is group number one. So if Cielo speaks and resonates to you, that is group number one. Group number two, or pile number two, this is Lucario. Lucario is carved from trolleite. This is a really unusual trolleite, at least in my experience. I'm certainly no expert, but has a lot of kind of this black and swirly other colors. Oftentimes, trolleite is like primarily that blue color. So, if Lucario is speaking, that is group number two. And then group number three is going to be this malacholla, so a combination of malachite and chrysocolla. Malacholla palm star being carved by Leandro de Souza. You can see the different designs, swirls. And his name is Rafael. So that is group number three. So at this point, I'm going to take a moment and just center and call in any guides. So you're welcome to stay for that part, or you can at any point go now to the timestamps in the description and select the timestamp for the pile of the being that resonated most with you. I can't wait to deliver your reading. If you are going to stick around to tune in, let yourself just settle. If you want to spritz anything or light a candle or some incense, I just spritz some of my Golden Sphinx Aura Mist, which is supportive with connecting to the Akashic Records, Sphinx and shape-shifting wisdom. Calling upon all guides, ancestors, teams, and lineages to share their wisdom with us today. Calling in the teams of each and every person watching this to support everyone in receiving the messages that are meant for them, and allowing whichever ones don't resonate or aren't aligned to be left behind composted. Okay. So let's jump in with group 1, shall we? Group 1, you chose Cielo. Cielo has this very soft and expansive energy. Okay, so let's look at the cards. Walrus is the animal. Remain vigilant about the current situation. Pay attention to signs and omens and let them dictate your choices. The 10 of Swords is the tarot card. And Solstice is the Uncertain Oracle card. So one of the first things that jumps out and is interesting, because I was thinking it right as I was holding this and saying, like, it's interesting on some level to choose apatite and to have this kind of like expansive feeling, because blue apatite is often a stone that is used for moderation and shifting habits or shifting kind of like compulsive or even addictive type of behaviors. Obviously, never a replacement for adequate mental health care and physical health care. These are all just metaphysical properties of stones, which can be incredibly powerful, but are not a substitute for any other care that you receive, but can be a great addition. So what I see here with solstice, I mean, we are coming up upon the equinox, the autumnal equinox. Mabon is what some people call it. It is on the September 22nd, and we'll be in that threshold space basically from, the 20th to the 23rd, somewhere thereabouts, where we are kind of shifting into autumn and this turning inwards that happens gradually as the light fades a little bit externally, as we come back inward, as we drop our leaves and, come towards more of a completion of a cycle. And so the solstice card coming up here feels like it's very timely on an external level, but it also brings this question to me about these like seasons of life transition as well that are maybe mirroring external cycles. I'm also seeing the 10 of Swords, and the 10s feel very much like this completion, this turning of the wheel, the completion of cycles and of energy, and of the swords, particularly this level of like cognitive cycles or compulsions or patterns or ways of thinking that feel very limiting, actually. Like it can happen when it comes up and it's this like pattern or way of engaging that is like outdated actually at a certain point. And so this feels in many ways like it's just echoing this seasonal transition of being in a time where there's actually maybe some patterns that are going to be dropping or falling away, or maybe you're working actually on shifting those patterns for yourself. And seeing this walrus with the remain vigilant about the current situation, paying attention to signs and omens, letting them dictate your choices, it feels like Cielo is offering a message about being in intimate collaboration with spirit when shifting any of your choices right now, and allowing some of the signs to help you maybe stay on track with any behavioral changes. I just get the sense that maybe you're trying to like implement some changes in your life, whether it's doing something for, your mental or physical health, or feeling balanced or well-being. My dog in the background is making a riot. Or some... Yeah, I'm just getting like behavioral changes. So something that could be health related, but it doesn't have to be like a dietary change or it doesn't have to be that type of shift. It could be like striving for more work life balance. It could be learning something or trying to spend less time on social media, these types, trying to like work on your sleep schedule, those types of things all feel really connected to, building sustainable patterns and really seeing like the external messages that affirm or validate or question sometimes some of the decisions or behaviors that we are changing. It does feel like a time where maybe there's like an awakening to a behavior that has felt unsupportive actually, and so with that there can be a lot of letting go. I'm hearing kind of like to be gentle or kind to yourself, that we can shift and try to make these changes and really try to like muscle them. But this kind of paying attention to signs and omens and allowing that to shift feels like waiting to be invited into change and waiting to collaborate with change rather than feeling the need to muscle that or constantly be fighting upstream. Like, what are some things you can do to make changes in your life feel more easeful? This also feels like in the Ten of Swords and the solstice, it feels like it could be a really potent time for you. Hearing Cielo say like expanding your horizon. So I'm almost wondering about like a dreaming or envisioning practice that could help you to see signs or omens when they arrive, like having a vision board or doing some of these large scale journaling type of practices. And then, even maybe to help complete the cycle, it can be very supportive. I've done this practice before at a lot of solstices and equinoxes, is kind of taking time to reflect on what you're letting go of and what you're calling in. And I wonder about like what you're clearing or composting or making space for, and what you're calling in for the new season of whatever this season of your life is, right? This could be the transition into autumn, or perhaps you're in a different hemisphere and this is your transition into spring, right? And so this is a hemispheric difference, but there is still a lot of value in doing this at any seasonal transition, right? This says solstice, but I'm utilizing it to signify equinox, right? This spokes of the wheel of the year that helps to kind of shift those temporal phases for us. Let's see. I'm really hearing like don't throw yourself under the bus. Um, it feels like harkening back, and I know I mentioned this earlier, but just as like an ask from Cielo to repeat that, of paying attention to the change that needs to happen and what's happening in this moment, and what needs, or what is calling to be different, does not mean the same thing as being cruel to yourself or othering a part of yourself to climb on top of them to make change. Like, we want to invite those parts of self actually into the fold and do as little self shaming in the change process. And this is actually like uh, Western scientifically speaking, right? This is a much more effective change model than utilizing shaming or negative, you know, encouragement, avoidance motivation rather than approach motivation is the kind of language that I would use in that context. And so this is using like, what are the things that you're moving towards and how can you build and support yourself in moving in that direction, rather than encouraging yourself to be avoidant of things that you're like afraid or not wanting to become. And so not throwing yourself under the bus feels very much like inviting those parts of yourself to change with you. And so we're going to kind of acknowledge all of the shifts that needs to happen and then welcome ourselves forward, rather than being like, I'm done, I'm leaving that behind forever. And there could also be grieving of parts of self that you're letting go of. I want to honor that that can be a huge part of letting go, is letting go of parts of self. It just isn't in as much of a future shadow work, that's based on whatever you're doing to change now. Get a sense of like, if you feel confused about your change process, this sign towards signs and omens, I've really felt this sense of like taking a deep breath and looking up, like allowing yourself to not get so absorbed in the change process that you're like just suctioned into it and like one pointed focus, but like expanding the horizon of what is possible and allowing yourself to receive those messages, like looking for pictures in the clouds, or allowing your gaze to kind of wander around and fall on whatever feels inspiring. Looking for angel numbers, those types of things. I think that this is your message, group one. I wish you all of the best. I hope that you have a beautiful equinox, Mabon, if you celebrate that. And I look forward to talking to you next week. Now we will move on to group two. Group two, you chose Lucario. Let's look at your cards. The polar bear is your animal. It says, stand up for yourself and speak your truth respectfully and compassionately with no attachment to outcome. The Ace of Swords is the tarot card. And the uncertain oracle is variable. The message that I'm getting from Lucario is around some form of like prioritizing the very, I'm hearing prioritizing the urgent present. And I want to be cautious because urgency is a feeling that is a relationship to time or a perception of time rather than, I mean, we can feel a sense of urgency when we perceive that the amount of time is not what is the amount of time we think would be required for something, or that it's going to use all of the time. But urgency is a relationship to time. And so when I also hear that, I want to avoid feelings of avoidant or being fearful, and see like what is actually calling your attention most importantly right now. What feels like the variable that you want to prioritize. Like when I see all of these shades of green, I could choose to focus on different things. I could focus on the darkness. I could focus on the lightness. I could focus on the amount of blue in the tone or the amount of yellow, right? Like there's all different ways that I can adjust my eyes to the contrast and to the experience of that variable. And so okay. So the image that Lucario is showing me is of like a camera lens that is focusing manually and focusing on like the background, and then the foreground like blurs out, and then focuses on the foreground and the background blurs out. And this is feeling like kind of the directive of which part to focus on. And so it's showing me that like the visual of the background where that's zoomed in on is this attachment or focus on outcome that misses the thing that is the closest to us. And so there's an ask to kind of draw your attention inward towards what is most present and towards what is most like relational or immediate. This is like paying attention to taking the step that is right in front of you. And with this, with the Ace of Swords, it feels like getting really interested in, I was going to say invested in, but it feels like getting really curious about even new seeds for self assertiveness. It says, this polar bear says, stand up for yourself and speak your truth respectfully and compassionately with no attachment to outcome. And this feels like if you are speaking in alignment to what is true for you in terms of what is respectful and compassionate to yourself and others, then you don't know actually how that situation is going to turn out. However, you do know that you acted in alignment with the thing that you had the most control over. And this feels like a mindset change. Like the Ace of Swords feels a little like a light bulb coming on, and it feels like it's like almost like growing right out of the head there. And it just feels like it's popping up out of this for some reason. And that there's this aspect of like, how powerful it is when we have those like, oh, wow, this is what's really important to me type of moments, or this feels really aligned, or this feels significant. And so with this, it feels like there's going to be this like popping up or arising of an opportunity to be assertive in your own truths, in your own perception, in your own narratives, in a way that is respectful and compassionate to yourself and others. But that if you lose yourself in where you're going, it's going to be easy to compromise that present moment, one step after the next. I'm hearing this quality of being in integrity. Like what are your values? What does respect mean to you? What does compassion mean to you? I encourage you to consider the difference between kindness, compassion, and niceness. I encourage you to consider your cultural connection to etiquette and what, politeness versus compassion looks like to you. These are all ways that we can almost interrogate the way that we feel able or capable of standing up. And it's interesting in this context because Lucario, one of the things that his gifts is being like a finder or a keeper of lost things. And that doesn't actually mean, one of the things that he was really clear about is I had like lost something right after I had gotten this, and he had told me this, and I was like, can you help me find this? And he was like, it's not my gift or even my job to like find things for you that are not aligned for you to have. And sometimes we let go or lose things or don't have things anymore that are just not in alignment. And that's okay. We don't have to actually fully understand that. And so this doesn't mean that if we focus on the present moment that we're definitely going to get that outcome that we want, right? It's really about kind of like releasing the attachment to outcome and still acting within integrity. And in order to do that, we have to know what our integrity is. And so spending some time really, with the swords, I really think of like journaling practices, of talking it through, of finding a way to like even record yourself to capture some of the narrative thought process going on, because I imagine there will be some like glimmers of opportunity, some breaths of fresh air where you can actually breathe a little newness or a little like excitement into the process for yourself. Lucario saying like look for the places where like the clouds break, and I'm seeing like a gray sky, but then like a little like pocket of blue or of like yellow rimming the clouds, and of like letting your eyes fall on also the variables that have wiggle room. That also feels like a way of engaging with nuance and difference in a way that feels productive and interesting. I'm feeling a lot of energy around the throat. So this feels super connected to speaking your truth, to um, clearing any blockages out of that area, encouraging practices that clear out and strengthen like the vagus nerve or the throat chakra area, like the throat energy. So like singing, gargling, playing instruments that encourage that like strengthening of pathway. But like, yeah, just singing in the shower could be helpful. Speaking out loud, um, humming. Yeah, I think that that's it. Group two. Okay. Thank you for being here this week. I look forward to speaking with you next week. I hope that you have a beautiful autumnal equinox, a beautiful Mabon if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, um, and a spring equinox if you are not, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. Okay, group three. You chose Rafael. Let's look at your cards. So the animal is the condor, and it says, you are too enmeshed in this situation, so step back and see the bigger picture before making any decisions or taking action. You're too enmeshed in this situation, so step back and see the bigger picture before making any decisions or taking action. The tarot card is the Queen of Wands. And the uncertain oracle is sweet. So Raphael has this seraphim like dragon seraphim energy of having this kind of like interdimensional quality that is becoming denser to relate more to the human experience. And when I see these cards, one of the things that I was relating it to was how, you know, we are in a time where a lot of planets are retrograde. And when Mercury is retrograde, even on its own, without so many other planets being in retrograde, there can be this aspect of like misunderstanding or relational conflict that arises. And, you know, this is a little unfair because I do these in order, but I'm just like wanting to highlight or name that each of these piles has had some aspect of like what perspective to be taking and how to encourage that. And that just feels thematically like part of the time that we're in is where should I be attending? Where should I be placing my focus? What am I missing here? And this really feels like a message of like, how can you give yourself a little bit of space and distance to be able to see that like the condor, has that high elevation bird's eye view where it can see things all laid out at once and can see how the pieces are interacting and fitting together in an interesting and potentially revelatory way. The Queen of Wands is this alchemy. It's a double elemental. All of the court cards I read as double elementals, and as do most people. The queens are the suit of water, and the wands are the element of fire, or the queens are the element of water, I guess, right? And the wands are the element of fire. And so it has this like alchemy of fire and water and this kind of like transmutation that happens of holding these different extremes in relationship to magic. When I see this and am feeling the kind of like almost familiar energy, it feels like this relationship to personal magic that is related to passion and purpose and career in a very like feeling your own wisdom and not going by the book or by the wisdom of others. There feels like a lot of self-trust in this card in terms of like trusting. For some reason, what's coming to mind is like trusting your eye in like an aesthetic way, even like people who are artistic or who are intuitive in some way, say you're like arranging things into a shape, right? And you have these different elements, like in collaging or in interior design, you're arranging like the different items of furniture that might be in a room. And maybe you do, like perhaps you're a very cognitive person and like, I want to put this here because it's going to like increase the light in the room. That's great. Some people learn and behave and act that way. And that is sometimes accessible to those people and sometimes not. However, there's also this sense of like, I just think it'll feel better in this other thing, right? And that feeling or that gut instinct or like just trusting your impulses feels like it's holding a valuable part of the process. And in order to get that really appropriate feel, I just see someone like moving something and then taking a couple steps back and like getting the big picture feel and then adjusting, right? And having this kind of like zooming in and out or something, the like dilation of that experience feels really supportive. And in this image, I like that the word is sweet, and I will tell you why. But in this, I see both this like kind of not hard, but saturated, this like saturated pink rim, but it also feels like that pink is like it's smeared out or it's draining or filtering out of that like enclosure and is affecting, even if I'm seeing this as like an aura almost, right? This is maybe the barrier, but this is like the effect of the aura or the energy that is like bleeding out into the surrounding. And that we actually get a better, like if we were to look at it from here, we're very aware maybe of something, right? And maybe your eyes are doing it different. So this is an example. But for me, when I zoom out, I see, wow, there's actually proportionally a lot of pink, even though that circle that bled out there is relatively small. And so we get to see the way that something's impact carries over. And I love that that is sweetness, right? That in this card is sweetness. How can that seep in to other things? And so I'm wondering about, and this is something that feels like a message from Rafael, is like, how can you, when something doesn't go according to plan or when you're getting a feel for something, how can you give yourself a chance to take a step back And what are your practices and processes of giving yourself like a step back, giving yourself some perspective, whether that is a practice for you of like going for a walk or sleeping on it, right? Before making these other drastic decisions, of being able to really like encourage moderation and patience with your process, and to see the things that are sweet or that are working, and to even see unintended positive outcomes from things that feel like detours or snafus. Being enmeshed in a situation, we can sometimes feel like, oh, that's not working the way that I had in mind. And that's really frustrating. And then we take a breather and we sleep on it, or we go for a walk. These are just two examples, right? Or we put on a song and dance for a minute and a half, right? And we come back, or we eat a snack, right? We come back and we look at it with new eyes, and we see, okay, I don't have to actually change all of these. I can just adjust these. And this is going to be a really cool collaborative process with the process itself that is unfolding in a way that I couldn't have foreseen. And that's really what I see as like, what is the unintended sweetness of certain things, and how can you trust your instinct to be able to go with the flow and provide what is necessary to balance any detours or any obstacles out in a way that actually is better than if everything went exactly as you had planned. Seeing the wisdom of I'm just seeing like the wisdom of road closures. So I guess detours, right? I'm just seeing like when your road is blocked, sometimes that side path is like the scenic route. It's the really beautiful route that takes a little longer. I also really hear that like focusing on the sweetness and on the things that are working and on what brings sweetness into your life is going to be very productive right now. It's going to like help continually return to your own magic. And I'm really feeling this sense of like that third eye of like trusting what you see in your mind's eye, or trusting what you see with your heart, even in this sense of like allowing your seeing to be a non-linear or not like only cognitive process as well. Okay, group 3. Thank you so, so much. I hope that you have a beautiful week ahead, a beautiful Mabon, um, um, autumnal equinox. If you are not in the Northern Hemisphere, a beautiful spring equinox. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. If you have made it all the way to the end, this is going to be in the next month or so. I'm going to actually shift some of the content that was on my Patreon onto YouTube. So it is a really good time to subscribe if you wanted to receive notifications for tarot scopes and other things that I'm going to be adding, as well as you can sign up for my newsletter through my website, and I'm going to be sending out some free channeled messages through there that I'm shifting away from kind of a paywall. So if you're interested in any of that, feel free to reach out and ask questions or visit my website. I really look forward to seeing everyone next week for the week ahead. Bye.